All right, looks like we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donny, and tonight is the night you have all been waiting for. We have the much anticipated showdown between Mattman from Standing for Truth Ministries and Jackson Roe. What are we debating tonight? We are debating the important and very interesting question: did man live to 900? Now, tonight will be a formal, semi-informal debate, as we will be having between 15 and 20-minute opening statements. Whatever time is not used for the opening statements will be thrown into the audience Q&A. Then we're going to have 8-minute rebuttals, a 25-minute discussion where the debaters will be asking each other questions and discussing the points relevant to the debate topic. Then, of course, we're going to have 5-minute closing statements, and this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have an audience Q&A about 35 minutes. So make sure you are tagging me with your questions. That way I don't miss them. Make sure you're tagging me at Standing for Truth. Before I introduce the superstars for the night, the celebrities, Mattman and Jackson Roe, these seasoned debaters, highly knowledgeable and sophisticated individuals, which is why this debate is going to be a debate to remember. I just wanted to go over a few reminders for everybody. As you have probably seen on the channel in the upcoming live stream section, we have a ton of epic debates coming up that I don't want you guys to miss. So tomorrow night we'll be back, and this time we will be having a theology-related debate, specifically soteriology. Is Perseverance of the Saints biblical? J.D. Martin and A.K. Richardson, another couple highly knowledgeable guys, seasoned debaters. So that is definitely going to be one to remember. Then on the 3rd, so this week again, we got another epic debate. This one on evolution. Is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Dr. Kent Hovind and Jonathan here, who will be debating this important topic. We put out a challenge video about a month ago pertaining to the topic of evolution, and I've been swamped with requests. We've got evolution debates scheduled for you guys right up until probably the rapture. So stay tuned for that. Then we've got Jackson Roe will be back again debating Professor David McQueen on the Cambrian explosion, best explained by creation or evolution. And Professor McQueen will be back actually next month debating Taylor, Snake was right, on the age of the earth. And a couple of big ones here. Dr. Leighton Flowers and CJ Cox, the total inability debate, an important topic. This one I'm really, really excited for. And of course, the grand finale in March, the justification debate, sola fide, does the Bible teach salvation is by faith alone? Dr. Robert Sungenis and Kelly Powers. And here's the last one I'll cover, and I'll just direct everybody to the upcoming live stream section because we have a packed 2022 for everybody. If you're a debate addict like me, then this year is going to be a year of fun. So is evolution a reasonable scientific theory? Tom Jump and Ken Hovind, both of these gentlemen have had, what seems to be hundreds of debates. So that is going to be certainly one to remember. So anyways, enough for me. We've got a great chat already. People are pumped for this epic showdown between Mattman and Jackson Roe. Let's break the ice, get to know the debaters a little bit before we get into these opening statements. Why don't we start with our very own Mattman from Standing For Truth Ministries. What's going on, brother? How are you tonight? A little bit about you for anybody who may not know who you are. Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, I like doing video editing. I video edit most of the things that you would see on Standing For Truth's channel and my own. Mine was actually just nothing but a backup channel in case this one ever got taken down because we touch on taboo subjects. We've learned to tap dance around those now, so I think we're pretty good now that this won't go anywhere, which is good. This debate today is actually one of my favorite topics. If you've actually seen the few debates that I've had, it's actually been on this topic, a couple of them. So I really like it, and I think it's important because if the Bible is really the history book of the world, and these people lived that long, then if that could validate it, then it validates all of Scripture. So I think the topic is important, and I really enjoy the subject. So I just hope my opponent Jackson Wheat does it, or Jackson Roe does as well.
Hey, one of the two evolutionists, Jackson. So I appreciate that intro there, Mattman. And yes, we've got that secondary channel, Young Earth Creation, that is now up to like 19,000 subs. We've got that flood video that's at like 1.1 million views, guys. So we do re-upload nearly everything to that channel. And so please make sure you're subbed to that channel as well if you're not yet subbed. So let's hand it over to Jackson Roe. Jackson Roe, you've had a ton of debates now in the creation versus evolution world. So thanks again for being here. What's going on? A little bit about yourself and anything new over at your channel?
Well, I've been uploading a good amount of videos, mostly little short videos, but try to make them information packed. I've been doing a lot of research in genetics, which I've been lacking before, so I've been reading up on that. I did some calculations this morning that I'll bring up in the debate about genetic mutations. But yeah, I was kind of warned by a bunch of people not to debate Matt because he's apparently so good. But you know, win or lose, I don't care. I just enjoy debates, so we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that, Jackson. You always make for a good, sophisticated debate. And this is an exciting topic, an important topic. So if you guys like what you're seeing from Jackson Roe, please check out his channels. They are linked in the description box. So make sure you go over there and check out his videos. So let's kind of get right into it. And before I do, logical, plausible, probable, congratulations, my good man, on the 2,000 subscribers. Awesome. I'm glad that you know we helped you hit that 2K mark. I'm sure we're gonna have some more epic after shows this year. And he says Mattman coming out of debate retirement. So this is gonna be fun. So that being said, guys in the audience, make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing For Truth. Super chat questions, of course, will take priority, and we're going to have a solid audience Q&A, so we'll get through a ton of them. I guess we're going to be handing it over to Matt. We've got between 15 and 20-minute opening statements. Matt, I know you've got a kind of pre-prepared opening statement in the form of a video. If you wanted me to get that going for you, or
I figured it's going to be more fun this time rather than just listening to me talk. It's all visual this time. It's going to be fun.
All right. Well, in that being said, then let me share screen and audio. Everybody in the chat, Matt, you can even give me a text as well. Let me know that everything's coming in smoothly. All right. And okay, here we go.
Evolution teaches that the present is key to the past. That's uniformitarianism. How things are today is how they were in the past. But if we use this mindset, we would have never guessed that a sloth was over 6,000 pounds in the past, since today we can carry them around like babies. Or that penguins were almost 7 feet tall and could easily walk up and murder you while you're using an ATM. But now we know that these things are true because we have found evidence that they are. So it's more the mindset we have when considering the past that dictates how we view the current. So then, what is the evidence that mankind could have lived a long time in the past? It's not like we can just go to some ancient human and find an ID in their grave and say, oh look, Noah was 900 years old. So we have to look at the genome of both modern and ancient man to resolve this question. Let's begin with, what is aging? Why do we inevitably die from old age? Well, there's two major factors that contribute to this: genetics and overall DNA damage and loss. We used to think that genetics only played a very small role, if any factor at all, in determining how long we lived. The numbers changed all the time. We know better now. And the more we learn, the more we see that number grow. Another contributing factor is that of DNA loss. You see, every cellular replication that happens, we lose bits of DNA. Picture this happening like opening a zipper. The metal or plastic teeth along the edges of the zipper represent DNA. As we age, the zipper opens more and more. Thus, the more DNA is lost till eventually too much has occurred and the damage is done and we die. This is called the Hayflick limit. When cells divide, that genetic material needs to be copied. This is called DNA replication. Unfortunately, every replication doesn't bring the full DNA sequence with it. And after 40 to 60 cellular replications today, people die because just too much DNA loss has occurred. So, if we're losing bits of DNA every replication, and then we die when we lose too much, then logic tells us that if we had more DNA in the past, then we could live longer, since more DNA could be lost before too much damage has occurred, killing us. Think of your genome like glass. Now think of DNA damage like a crack in that glass. A crack in a small window is catastrophic, but that same size crack on a larger window doesn't cause nearly as much damage and is not as bad overall. So, if our ancient patriarchal ancestors had more DNA than us today, then it would validate that they would have the biological potential to live much longer. What do we see? Exactly that. They had not just a little more, they had a lot more. Nearly an entire chromosome worth more. That's right, they had so much more DNA that it amounts to nearly the size of the entire Y chromosome. Imagine how much more damage the genome could handle with so much more DNA. That's a lot of buffer. Now, we know that a lot of animals, aquatic life, and reptiles never stop growing until they die. So therefore, the larger the shark or reptile, the longer it lived. So if they lived longer in the past, and we know ancient man ate these things, then why is it impossible for us to think that man also did not live longer in the past, since they lived at the same time? We know that man lived alongside of these creatures because we found evidence of tool markings on the very bones that came from them scraping meat from these creatures, and then they made jewelry out of them. We have evidence that they ate giant cave bears and sea tortoise and the now extinct auroch. They ate giant deer, giant sloth, and even giant cows, including sharks and dolphins. And we have evidence a giant bird ate a Neanderthal child. Clearly, they all lived together. And yes, cavemen are mentioned in scripture. These people were never missing links in the line of human evolution. The Bible perfectly details who they were. So, we have humans living at the same time when all of these other long-living creatures were. Yet, for some reason, we're told to believe that man alone was immune to these biological effects of a longer life that all of these other life forms seem to take advantage of. That makes no sense. Geneticists who work exclusively on aging all agree that we can live much longer in the future through genetic manipulation. One of the leading aging researchers, Dr. Aubrey de Grey, has said that humans, with the aid of gene editing via the removal of mutations, should be able to live for 1,000 years. He even said that person is probably someone alive today. So, if genetically we can get there by using technology to essentially revert our genome back to a mutation-free state, then why is it impossible to think that our ancestors who were more mutation-free didn't live as long as modern-day geneticists are saying that we should live to be? I mean, isn't it a pretty big coincidence that secular science just so happens to throw out the biblical patriarch ages of longevity as our genetic potential? The Patriarchal Drive study shows that after 10 generations from the flood, Abraham was already dead from old age at 175. That's down from 950 years old in just 10 generations. Jacob, 4 generations later, died at 145. And by the time of Moses, 7 generations after him, we have a 120-year maximum lifespan plateau. So the drop from maximum lifespan to a plateau of 120 was rapid, about 20 generations in all. Not only does the 2012 study show that the father's age contributes the most mutational load to the offspring, which Noah would have passed on the most in history, affecting all of humanity alive today, But we also see the same results in experiments today, and they are identical to what patriarchal drive discovered. We see this in inbreeding experiments. The same biological decay curve happens in birds, rodents, dogs, and fish. So if we see these same results in animal experiments and simulations that essentially are the same as the theme in the Bible and the story of Noah, then why is it impossible to think that this could not be the case? Of course it would be. And the predictive power of the biological decay curve and patriarchal drive is spot on. They even admit that something happened around 5,000 years ago that caused harmful mutations to arise out of nowhere and then explode in the human population. Our world in the past was very different going back in time. There was more magnetism, double atmospheric pressure, and oxygen. All of these things are conducive to a longer lifespan. We have 10 reasons to conclude that it is obvious that man lived longer in the past and his true potential was somewhere nearing 1,000. Let's go over them. 1. Genetics is the major cause for aging, and we inherited a genetic burden through Noah and his extreme age, topped with inbreeding. Animal studies and patriarchal drive by John Sanford and Dr. Robert Carter validate this correlation and show an identical biological decay curve that we would expect to see if the biblical story of Noah was true and the ages in Scripture were a fact. So, if the evidence corresponds to what Scripture says, why not believe that it was true? The predictive power of patriarchal drive shows us what happens when extremely aged fathers do have offsprings, what the results would be. They line up perfectly with what we would expect to see if a human who was 500 years old had children. And the statistical probability of this lining up with the biological decay curve is beyond coincidence. We now have learned that mutations are passed on based on the father's age, and the older they are, the more mutations are passed down, on and on. And it just so happens to line up perfectly with what Scripture tells us about Noah and his age when he had his children, and the genetic mutational load he placed on them, which would have reduced not only their lifespan, but all future generations, if Noah was truly that old when he was a father. If all of these are not true, then why? Number 2, a larger genome in humans allows for more damage to occur. And we now have evidence that we had much larger genomes in the past, which logically concludes that we could have lived much longer from this alone. If not, why not? 3, other cultures mention a time called the Golden Age. It's quite peculiar that civilizations that supposedly never met all decided to come up with this idea that humanity lived to extreme ages in the past. Why would they all invent the exact same ridiculous idea? 4, we have clear evidence that telomeres get shorter every generation, yet the decay rate stays the same, which validates that people had the potential to live much longer in the past just from having more padding protecting the ends of the chromosomes. The logical conclusion with this evidence would be that this allowed people to live longer. If not, why? 5, we literally have genealogies that go back to Noah from different places in the world. These are not biblical genealogies. These are outside lineages of unbroken chains of royalty going all the way back to Noah from different places in the world. Clearly, these were real people. If they were not, when did they stop being real people and turn into myth? Number 6, in the past we find more oxygen, more pressure, more magnetism. All have been documented and shown to extend lifespan. So if all of these conditions were met in the past, why could man not have lived longer just from these aspects alone? 7, aging is related to genetics. There is no doubt about this. Since it is genetic, then genetics gives us an answer to the riddle of human lifespan. If aging is related to mutations, then we can predict that removing mutations is better for us, and we would live longer. We see this as true in multiple studies. And now we have entire laboratories dedicated to human longevity, like the Sense Foundation, Unity, ICOR, the Methuselah Foundation, and the Longevity Science Foundation, and many more. Our model answers this paradox of human aging, but evolution has many theories trying to solve this riddle and explain the discrepancy. That is why it is a paradox for them, because it makes no sense evolutionarily. Number 12, mutation rates are too fast for humanity to be very old. In our model, this is easily explained from Noah, And we can see that these mutation rates and both SNVs and harmful mutations are rising at this time. Number 8, we know mutations are building up and up and up, compiling with no way for the body to get rid of them. There are many names in biology for this, but this mutation accumulation problem has led geneticists to question how humanity could have ever lived as long as it has. How could these mutations, which are lowering fitness, adding disease to the population, and overall harming the system, not be evidence of a longer lifespan going backwards in time? We know mutation accumulation is a real problem, but here's the dead giveaway that it is true. The Human Genetic Mutation Database alone tells us this. It adds anywhere from 6,000 to 20,000 new genetic diseases to the database every 3 months, which is an annual growth of over 24,000 new diseases from mutations on the small side. In 2017, over 20,000 new genetic mutation diseases were added at the population level. As of 2017, the total number was 214,158. As of December 2021, we are now at 352,731. Selection is not stopping nor having any effect on this, and beneficial mutations are nowhere to be found to help. What do we see? Genetic degradation and mutation accumulation. And top that with the fact that the average person is missing over 100 genes. How can evolution try to tell us one thing when we're seeing the exact opposite? And if this is what we see, why wouldn't ancient man with less mutation saturation overall not live as long? 9. Removing mutations from just a single gene in mice allowed them to live 23% longer, and they admit that the same should roll over into humans. Now think about this. If they removed mutations from just those 20 longevity genes, that's an increase of lifespan over 460%, or 672 years of age. All we actually need to do is remove them from 25 genes, and we now have the potential to live for 1,000 years. This is a 787% increase in lifespan. And this evidence is more proof that an ancestral genome with less mutations was far superior than ours today. If not, why is this evidence wrong? Why are the geneticists wrong? Number 10. Our leading geneticists on biological aging all agree that man could live to 1,000 if we remove mutations through gene editing software. Why are they wrong when all of the evidence and actual repeated studies have shown us that we are headed in that direction and that they are correct in this prediction? And why does it happen to just line up so coincidentally with the Bible? That's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to obviously not focus on answering all of those. Just pick a couple and let's have a good time. Number 14.
So that's why the video was longer. It had just silence going on. Okay.
Well, there we go. There's Matt's opening statement, 15 minutes right on the dot. So I appreciate that. And to the chat, since I was screen sharing, I think I caught a couple questions, but I may have missed a couple as well, as we've got a lively chat already. I appreciate the super chats and the support. So feel free at this point to start tagging me with your questions. I am no longer screen shared, so I'll be able to save them a lot easier. So Jackson, we are going to hand it over to you now for your 15-minute opening statement. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to share my screen also. Let's see. All right, you seeing it?
Yep.
All right, we agree on aging to some extent. Now, after Eve ate the apple and the fall of man happened, I don't see why the telomeres wouldn't be shortening immediately with this generation, certainly the next generation of their children. And you said there was more genetic material in the past. That may be true. I'm not sure. But was it in the telomeres? That's what's important. Now, this is Lonesome George, the last Penta Island tortoise. He died in 2012. Reptiles don't age exactly the same way that mammals do. They can live to be 200. George died much earlier than that, even though he had the potential to live that long. It's usually something minor, like a bacterial infection or a virus, something that will come along and kill a tortoise before it reaches, a massive age. So my question is, after the fall of man, why would this not happen to a human? Before the advent of modern medicine, how are people living in 900 when diseases were apparently in existence because Eve had eaten the apple? Here's me in the Galapagos. I'm going somewhere with this, I think. I forget the exact order. But yeah, me looking like Justin Bieber in the Galapagos in 2012. Taking pictures of tortoises. That's on Isabella Island. Kind of unrelated, but anyway. This is a Greenland shark. It can live to be 400 years old. But the way it does that is it has a very slow metabolism, grows very slowly as a result, and it lives in a very cold environment. But even this thing doesn't live to be 1,000. Now, I heard Matt talk about a golden age of aging, and in Jainism, it was especially golden because their gods lived to be, or their human gods lived to be in the quadrillions. This is some impossible name to pronounce, lived to be 15 quintillion, actually. 15 quintillion years old is how old this person was, allegedly. I mean, obviously no one here believes that, I don't think. But there are some problems with the biblical ages. They just don't seem to make a lot of sense. Noah died exactly at 950. He had his first child at exactly 500. The flood happened when he was exactly 600. Adam died exactly 930. Seth was born at exactly 130. And Shem died at exactly 600. Just these even numbers don't ring true to me. Now, talking about that decay curve, it looks compelling when you just look at it on the surface, but there's some problems with these numbers and this number. Multiple people were included in the same generation, like Ishmael and Isaac, and Levi and Joseph in the middle part there. And they include Joshua's age of 110, although others in his generation lived to be 60, according to some passage in Exodus. I forget which it is. Creating the tail of the graph, the end of it there, by using the average Roman lifespan, which wasn't even in the Bible, when John, at the same time, lived to be 90, and that could have been used. And we see, starting in the 1800s, I mean, you can see the ages are pretty much static. But then with the advent of modern medicine and agriculture and other things, the age starts going up. And Matt also said that some geneticists believe we can live to be 1,000. I haven't heard that. I've heard the cap would be about 200, that the first person to live to be 200 might be alive today. I think 1,000 would be stretching it, especially with this pool of inbreeding we see from Adam and Eve. This is the biblical genealogy. You have basically no genetic diversity from Adam and Eve and their kids. You have to just inbreed. And it doesn't matter how perfect the genome was, they're going to, after the fall of man, they're going to accumulate mutations, like Matt was saying. And it's not going to be slow, like a slow decay curve over thousands of years. It's going to show up quick, like in the Habsburg royal family. They had more genetic diversity than Adam and Eve would have had, and they still came out malformed, like the guy on the left you see there. So 6,000 years, we would all just be a pile of goo. I did a calculation this morning about HIV mutation rate, compared it to humans. On average, there's 1.1 mutations per each generation, so to speak, of HIV. I'll stop sharing now. Let's see. Now, what I came up with, there are 10,000 nucleotides in HIV, 1 mutation per replication. There are 6 billion nucleotides in the human genome, 3 billion base pairs, which would be the equivalent of 650,000 mutations per generation if we were equaling to. The HIV replicates every 2 days. It's been in the US for 40 years. It's existed for much longer than that, but I just used 40 years. So that's 14,600 days times 650,000 divided by 2 for its 2-day replication. That comes out to 4.7 million, or 4.7 million years that humans could exist and not have any ill effects, apparently, because HIV is unfortunately doing just fine if we're going off mutation rates. So I think this idea of genetic entropy doesn't really work. But here's my little note of the calculation. Anyway, I got another one about, what's it about? Thyroids. It came out to 6 million years, so it's even worse for the case of genetic entropy. But anyway, that's pretty much the opening statement. Probably not 20 minutes long or however long, but there we go.
All right, Jackson, I appreciate that opening statement. As we said earlier, whatever time is not used for the opening statements, we will throw into the audience Q&A, as the audience Q&A here always ends up turning into a second debate. The audience Q&A is always very important, as the questions are always so relevant to the debate topic, guys. So make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth, and that way I don't miss them. So we are now moving into the uninterrupted rebuttal portion of the debate. We've got eight minutes for the rebuttal, and we are going to hand it over to Mattman for his 8 minutes. Matt, whenever you're ready, my good man, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
All right. His first point that he brought up was how come Adam and Eve were not aging themselves? Perhaps this had something to do with the tree of life. The tree of life was something that they had access to, that they were removed from. So once they removed that, that could have had something to do with their aging. It also says that the ground was cursed, and so were the animals. So there was a curse that was set on pretty much everything. Now, obviously, we don't believe that the animals were eating from the tree of life, granting them biological immortality, but perhaps it was doing something to human beings. So once they got removed from that, some type of biological aging started to occur. We know that when we eat better today, we enhance the chances that we live longer, not genetically, but through different processes like activating longevity enzymes and metabolic enzymes. So perhaps the tree offered some type of a fruit that could activate senescence and remove those senescent cells from our body. We don't know, so it's speculation. But the thing that you said next was that reptiles live a long time, and that's very true. And here's something very interesting. If reptiles never stopped growing, and we know that they lived a very, very long time, we have evidence that man ate these things. So they were living at a time when these reptiles that were living much longer than they do today were being consumed by man. Then why wouldn't man be living for a very long time when they're living at the same time these creatures were? So something was going on. Something's unique about that. So I actually like the idea that there's long-lived reptiles that are walking around and man's around at the same time. I believe it lends more credence to the fact that we could have lived longer just from being alive at that same time when they were. You said disease was not present right after that. So why would they have died? For example, Adam and Eve, if they're not catching HIV, if they're not catching disease, why are they dying? Well, the same reason that people would die today from old age. It's accumulation. It's like little cracks in a window all the time, right? We don't lose our vision overnight. We don't get cancer overnight. Disease incubates, and it takes a long time for pretty much anything to happen inside the body. You don't lose just like we don't lose our vision. It's a slower process. The process would have just been slower in the past. Anything that would be happening to us now, much later, down near the end, because of all our genes being messed up, it just happens quicker. It's a much faster rate now. Take it back, it's slower. It's a slower process. The Hayflick limit shows us that creatures usually live based on when they reach puberty. By the time they go through that, they only live about 40 to 60 cellular replications, and then they die. What causes that death? That's the end. There can be no more breakage of the genome, and they die. The next question was, oh yeah, our biblical text never says that the patriarchs were gods, though. The Indians, the Vedics, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita. There's so many different religions that come from even those two texts, because they have gods for everything. They have a god for the pen that I'm holding, right? And they just make things up all the time. They're like, yeah, that god has lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Oh, okay. I don't know how we can test that, but we can at least test human beings. We can't test gods. So I guess I will say the question about inbreeding. You said inbreeding would affect, it would affect us too much. Well, Europeans are much more inbred than Africans are, and Native Americans are much more inbred than us. Much more. Genetic diversity among Native Americans is extremely low. So why aren't we genetically inferior to Africans? Because it's, even though we're much more inbred than Africans, lifespan is almost the same. So what I mean by that is, you would say you're thinking that inbreeding has this astronomical effect, but it takes a long time for that inbreeding. Now, the major cause for the drop in the lifespan was the age of the parent. And the age of the parent, being Noah, if he was 500, would be that example of horrendous problems. Then you mentioned, maybe we'll get into why we didn't find, like, what you're talking about generation times. So like you said, in the Roman era, the people were living already about the same amount that we are today. And that's true, because if you look at the patriarchal drive, it's only 6 generations until there's a plateau. Literally 6 generations. So we literally it would be extremely rare for us to find any written records of people being documented living for over 200 years, because literally only 6 generations existed where people lived over 200. And that's how quickly that decline happened. And by then it was the Egyptians and, first dynasty. They weren't documenting lifespans like that, really. So another one, you said HIV, and you also have a video on viroids. But these aren't living things. So you take their genome, and the genome isn't like ours. It's actually circular. So it's a human being has a genome that's linear autosome pairs. So they're aligned like this. So when damage comes, it can come at the top or the bottom, and it can hit it and start deteriorating it. But if a genome is just round, what's it going to attack? Where's it going to come in? You see, the genome of these things being round like this is it's only going to find a mutational hotspot, and the mutations are just going to be flipping over in that one area. It's not going to be cascading and going out throughout the genome like it does on human beings. We can be attacked anywhere. We can lose genes. You can inherit a bad gene. You can get a mutation in one gene. I mean, it's lots can happen in a huge genome. In a very small genome, not a lot can happen. And when something does happen, it's like you're asking why genetic entropy didn't kill these things. Well, they're not alive. You can't kill something that's not alive with genetic entropy. It doesn't work like that. Our model of genetic entropy, if you type in genetic entropy and go to CMI or John Sanford's page, it actually says that the theory is based on long living organisms with large genomes. So you're looking at small organisms with small genomes that literally aren't even alive. So that's not what genetic entropy really is. You're looking at more of a model of longevity of something that's called like ericatastrophism, and they're just very different. How am I on time? Just wanted to get to everything.
You're doing good. You've got exactly 1 minute and 10 seconds left.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Awesome. So I think I got to everything that he was mentioning. I'm trying to think. What was there? Yeah, the Roman consensus. By the time the Romans came along, there was a they had already plateaued to the lifespan that we are today. And so I don't think we'd be able to go into the past and find, like, that Roman, he was 600 years old. That's just not what we would see. And plus, think about how they test the age of a fossil or a human being that was in the ground. They first base it on, well, let's see how many teeth they had, because our teeth grow in as we age. So they usually base it on dental anatomy, not like, oh, he's tall, so he must be old. So they usually look at teeth, and that would probably be the only way of determining biological age, is how many teeth are in the jaw. So there's not a lot to go by when it comes to biological aging. So even if we found Noah, that would be incredible, but it would be very hard to test his age by finding just his bones in the ground. It'd be very, very, very hard. So that's why I like genetics. Genetics literally solves the riddle for us and tells us what would happen if we were to remove the mutations that are inside of us today. And the geneticists are telling us that we can live just like the patriarchs could.
All right. Perfect timing there, Matt. I know these rebuttals fly by. That was 8 minutes, and we've got a ton of great questions flying in from the audience. We are at 100 people right now, so it's great to see everybody. Thank you for being here for this epic debate. So let's hand it over now to Jackson Roe. Just make sure you unmute yourself. You also have 8 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning when you hit the 7 minute mark, just so you know to kind of start wrapping things up. So go ahead. The floor is yours, Jackson.
All right. Well, he said in his opening statement there was more oxygen in the atmosphere in the past, and that's true, but only in certain layers of the past, so to speak, the geologic column. I know that you guys don't like the geologic column. I'm a big fan of it, as you might know. But especially in the Carboniferous period is where the oxygen was highest, and there's no evidence humans existed at that time. And the magnetic field has varied over time. It hadn't been going down at a steady rate. It's been fluctuating. That's evidenced by paleomagnetism. And what else? Let's see. Were you saying that eating old reptiles could cause humans to live longer? I think I probably misunderstood that. Matt?
I can answer that. No, not eating them. Just
Okay.
that we were alive at the same time that they were.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, I was just making sure. I didn't think that's what you were saying. But tortoises, Greenland sharks, they're all still alive. They're animals that live an incredibly long time, especially invertebrates. But that doesn't mean just because we live alongside things that can live a long time that we are going to live a long time. I don't think. Now you're comparing inbreeding to small populations to a start of 2 individuals. I think that's very different. Like genetic diversity in Native Americans, they didn't start with just 2 individuals. They had more to work with. It might have been a smaller population than, say, Africans or Europeans or whatever, but it wasn't 2 people. And viruses aren't living things, technically. I mean, some people debate that, but it's pretty much consensus that they're not. But they still are made of genetic material, either RNA or DNA. And you can cause viruses to die from mutation. They already operate at a high mutation rate that is almost to the edge of error catastrophe, which you mentioned. But you can induce a virus to go over that limit with mutagenic agents called lethal mutagenesis. So you can kill viruses that way with mutations. So I think the analogy makes sense. Anything made of genetic material is going to would decay if genetic entropy were true. That's really all the notes I have. It's probably just a couple of minutes long, but yeah, we can hand it back over.
All right. I appreciate that there, Jackson Roe. And as we said in the beginning, whatever time's not used for the opening statements and rebuttals, we're going to toss into the audience Q&A because we've got so many great questions coming in. And that wraps up the opening statements and the rebuttals. We are now moving into the open discussion. We've got between 25 and 30 minutes. What we like to do on this channel, of course, is keep the discussion on topic, sophisticated, cordial, respectful, and focusing on one topic at a time. Both Matt and Jackson, you guys are professional and cordial by nature, so this should be a very easy discussion to moderate. So Jackson just ended with his rebuttal, so why don't we hand it over to you, Matt, to kind of start us off here in the discussion. Maybe there's a couple points you wanted to address and a question you'd like to ask Jackson. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Sure. I'll start with an easy one, a personal question. not science, nothing like that. I
Right.
would just like to know, what evidence would you personally look for, or would you like for me to present that would convince you that people could live such a long time? That would probably be the best place to start, rather than just going, attack this gene, or let's talk about this. What are you looking for?
It's a good question. Let me see. I don't know exactly what I would be looking for, but I think I see some problems with the evidence that has been presented so far, and I just don't think it's compelling. I mean, I would know it if I saw it, but I really couldn't give you a specific example. I could tell you what would falsify evolution in my mind, but like if you found shark teeth in the Cambrian, or you could prove a pine tree was more closely related to us than a chimp is genetically, that would disprove evolution in my mind. But I don't know what I would be looking for to disprove man lived to be 900 exactly.
Okay. Well, you'll debate Standing for Truth on those other topics soon, so I
Yeah.
won't get into that one with you. So I guess what I would do would probably be the most to try to convince you. I would say a lot of people think genetic entropy is just something that's young Earth creation oriented, and the term that's invented by John Sanford. So I try to like to use the word genetic degradation, because lots of scientists believe it. So, for example, I would like. Have you heard of Alexei Kondrashov? He wrote a book called The Crumbling Genome, and Why Aren't We Dead 100 Times Over? He taught at a college. He wrote a book on this. And if this isn't a real problem, what has he been doing for the last 20 years? Like, what did he just make this up? Are these scientists just like working on something that's just made up myth? Or do you actually believe somewhat of genetic entropy, or not at all, because it's young Earth creation? Or
Well, I mean, there might be some kind of truth to it, but I don't think you're going to go back and exist for 1,000 years. I think even if genetic entropy were true, something like a disease is going to come along and kill you long before or cancer or something.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Most people today do not make 120.
Yeah.
Very few make our genetic potential. Very, very few. So you're right. And the main reason that is true is because of genetic entropy. As I showed you, the genetic database shows us that we're accumulating more mutations, but we're adding more disease to the genetic database. So the odds of catching new diseases that are going to kill us is exponentially growing. So if we go back in time and there's less diseases, there's less chance of dying at that higher age. So it's why we could live to a much higher time without disease killing us before we would reach those ages. Now, there is a patriarch that did die way before 900 and plus years old. He only lived like 750. So something killed him. We don't know what it was. It's just, he's just randomly down there at like 745 years of age or something. He just dies. Doesn't say why. Luckily, he had offspring, so he's part of that patriarchal lineage. But something killed him. Maybe a disease did. We just don't know. But you're right. I think disease is actually one of the great points of genetic entropy, because evolution says we don't have to worry about mutations, because selection will just get rid of them. Well, where is selection? We see hundreds of new mutations pouring in every single day, and selection's nowhere to be found. You throw in a beneficial mutation. Okay, great. Now I can drink milk all my life. How is that helping me with cancer? How is that helping me with any other disease? It doesn't do it. You can type in beneficial mutations. None of them help fight any of these new genetic diseases that come up.
Well, about diseases, you can make the argument that maybe just after the fall, some bacteria or viruses didn't exist, so they wouldn't be around to kill you. But I don't think you can make the argument that cancer couldn't exist. I think UV light alone. I mean, unless you believe, like Hovind, the canopy theory, the blocked out UV light, that or some other mutagenic agent in the environment, it's going to change it's going to cause a mutation for cancer. It's going to come along and kill you at age 200, or whenever.
Great point. Did you know I can list almost every single cancer is linked to a genetic gene mutation? So what if those gene mutations weren't there? So that it comes another factor. So if I inherited a gene from my mom, let's say the BRCA gene, which I did, it means my propensity to get breast cancer, even being a man, it's possible, but it's still 50-50 chance that you're actually going to inherit that gene mutation. I did. So I can literally die from breast cancer from that gene that my mom actually has, and she got breast cancer from. So it's why they even knew to test for it. So it's a mutation that's in the gene that wasn't in her parents. So it's interesting that a mutation came along, and now I have to risk dying from cancer really early, all because of that mutation. So again, we go backwards in time, less forms of cancer, less potential to get cancer, probably shouldn't die from cancer. Look at Donny moving around. You got to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, man.
Okay. I think going back in time, I mean, there's still going to be UV light. There's still a massive amount of inbreeding, starting with 2 individuals, no matter how perfect the genome was originally. So I think the argument that cancer wouldn't show up until much later, and at least in greater numbers, isn't a great argument. I think they would still suffer from cancer. Maybe not Adam and Eve themselves, but definitely their immediate offspring.
Well, it's not that just having some cancer cells in your body is the problem. It's, can your body recognize the ability to remove them from your system? They build up and they compound. It's called senescence. And did you know that we have compounds now called senolytics, and they can remove cancer cells from your body? They didn't know about these before, and they started finding them out. There's 2 that, if mixed together, work very strong. One is from red onions. It's called quercetin, but you need high concentrations. And the other one's from black tea. It's called theaflavin. You mix those 2 together, they can remove cancer cells that are accumulating in the body. So it's not just having random cancer cells in you is going to kill you. It's when they start to build up, because cancer cells don't die. So how can we remove them from the body? Maybe the tree of life gave some type of a fruit that allowed people to remove those things. Maybe the food before the flood was so good, it's so much better than it is today after being genetically modified and, inorganic. We've messed it all up. Nobody eats like they did in the pre-flood world. After the flood, everything was condoned. It says any animal you look at, you can eat for food. It doesn't matter. So before that, man didn't even eat anything but plants to live. And then after that, boom, we just started doing everything bad. We know that barbecuing our food raises glycation. Well, glycation stands for advanced glycolytic end products, which is an acronym for age. That's the word for it. So we literally are barbecuing and eating food that's aging us more rapidly and causing cancer to grow. So you go into the past, people didn't even eat foods that would cause cancer to grow. Nobody that lives on coconuts is going to get cancer from eating coconuts, but you eat barbecued beef every day. Carcinogens are extremely high. That's why they're off the charts on the glycolytic thing. So we go back, it's like scripture's telling us again, more reasons that people should have lived longer. And you look and we do the studies and the tests, and it's like, oh, look at that. Plants are healthier for you than eating that way. But, like you said, after the, flood, there's not a lot to eat. There's not a lot going on. So people had to, do things. Also, we have Eve's sequence. It was actually sequenced by Dr. John Sanford. So when you want to know, like, inbreeding would just be too much for those things, and it's too much, it would be overwhelming for the descendants to live, because you can't just take 2 things and put them on a boat and have them get off and reproduce and do just fine. But yet we have evidence of exactly that same thing with deer and sheep, where literally they've taken sheep and put 2 of them on the Kruligan Islands in the 1930s, and they left and came back 20 years later. There were 700 of them on the island, and they had no inbreeding problems, even though they could only inbreed with each other. They had completely populated, and heterozygosity was not an issue at all, because they could expand. See, the problem is if they didn't do what God said, and that was be fruitful and multiply. If they didn't listen to that, you're right. Humans would be wiped off. We would never live at all. But because we can populate and grow and expand, we won't die from inbreeding. Why do you think the gorillas and the cheetahs are dying today? Because they're not expanding. They're staying in a small population, and they die from inbreeding.
Well, have you heard of Snake Island? This is related to an island population. You ever heard of that? Snake Island. It's an island populated by, I think, golden furlances. They actually developed a 3rd gender, some sort of pseudo gender, to compensate for low genetic diversity because of inbreeding. So, I mean, maybe some goats would be all right for a while, but over a long period of time, get some crazy stuff going on to try to compensate with inbreeding. And they probably didn't start with 2 individuals. Also, it probably started with a small population.
No, just 2 goats. Yeah, on the Kruligan Islands, yeah, just 2 goats there. And then on New Zealand, it was 4 deer. One of them was a male. The rest were females. Today, you can go and kill all the deer you ever want in New Zealand. They've overpopulated the entire island.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I'm just saying the snake population probably started out with a few individuals, and
Oh, the snake
yeah,
on that Snake Island. Yeah, I'll have to look into that one. But I was just trying to give you examples of where inbreeding wouldn't be a problem as long as there's expansion going on. Since Adam and Eve were expanding in growth, and then there was the bottleneck of the flood, and then again expansion, the genetic inbreeding problem really, obviously, it was a problem because look at our declining of age. So yes, there was a genetic impact, but mostly because of Noah's age, and then also because of inbreeding. Right? They did marry their sisters and things like that, but the genome being new and without mutations, it could have withstood lots of damage. Whereas today, not a lot of damage can happen without severe consequences. That's why it only takes about 3 generations before there's horrible damage. And we know it's about 3 because of a genetic study called the Pottinger study, where they took cats in a zoo and they decided, let's change their diet on them. Where it's really expensive to feed them fresh meat every single day. So we're going to cook the meat and give it to the cats and see what happens to them. And within 3 generations, they were all messed up and mangled and horrible genetic problems, literally within just 3 generations. So we know to not do that to cats anymore. As a matter of fact, it's illegal to even feed cats cooked food in zoos to this day. Why we feed our house cats kibble kind of stuff is still beyond me. But I guess they figured out how to not make them completely degenerate. But, house cats are kind of outside of selection. We've messed them up a lot, and they're also really inbred, and they're very, very different than the wild cat we see. So humans can do the same problem. We can move to an island, and we can get to a point where we inbreed ourselves out within a couple generations. Again, because there's no expansion of the population. In the scripture, we always read that after there is just a few people, there's always an explosive population. Now, Neanderthal, they died from inbreeding. So you're right. Some of us didn't expand and go all over. They migrated around, lived in little different small populations of about 20 people, and inbreeding wiped them out within about 1,000 years.
I'm not sure about the Neanderthal thing. I mean, we've sequenced their genome. I'm not sure if inbreeding's been conclusively determined to be the cause of their extinction. I think it's kind of an open question on what caused it. But do you believe in the canopy theory that some creationists do? The ice canopy that blocked out UV light?
We just go with maybe, maybe not. Because there's no evidence, we can't have any evidence for it. It's just completely speculative. So if there was a canopy, it would help with, a couple things. It would explain a lot, but we also don't need it because genetic entropy has almost nothing to do with there being a canopy or not, because Dr. John Sanford doesn't believe in the canopy at all. Answers in Genesis doesn't believe it at all, but they believe man lived for a really long time. They think it doesn't really matter or play any effect on it because it's all genetic related.
Well, I haven't read John Sanford's book. I need to do that, but I've read some excerpts from it. And he may not believe in that, but he's definitely, I think he's trying to conform some stuff with his pre-existing beliefs from what I've read of it. So I'm not sure a secular geneticist would come to the same conclusion that Sanford came to about genetic entropy, which I don't know if that's a good argument or not, but I'm just saying that's, I think, probably true.
Yeah, I would agree with you because most of the people start from the starting point that evolution must be true. And so therefore, I don't understand why this is happening. And that's why they're paradoxes. So you're right. I don't think any standard person is going to come along and go, wow, look at that. The humans or any animal, they couldn't have lived for millions of years. Like Mendel's accountant that he wrote, like that just shows that deep time can't be true if these numbers are correct. So therefore, something must be at play that we don't know about. And that's why they're trying to solve it. That's why they're trying to fix this problem of rapid mutation rates with rapid accumulation of mutations. So I was going to say, can you name any predictions of genetic entropy that was made by John Sanford? Like, for example, how many generations will humans survive? But you just said you didn't read it. So
You haven't read I read some excerpts, but that's about it. Yeah, I need to read it.
yeah. As a matter of fact, on this channel, there's a lecture that he gave at the NIH for like 2 hours. So just put it in the headset and walk around. You can probably listen to it that way if you don't like reading very much.
Yeah, I need to start reading some more. I've been slacking on reading. But what do you don't, you're not big on my crappy calculations on mutations?
Well, I couldn't see him if I wanted to. That's really small right now.
Yeah, plus my handwriting's terrible. So
one of the things I was going to say is that the examples of flipping some of these genes that are broken, that are associated with longevity, literally turning on one of them allows mice to live 20% longer over that. And we know we have over 20 genes in our body that are associated with longevity, and most of them are damaged, or most of them have mutations in them. So if we can remove those, that's what these longevity people are doing. You should look up Dr. Aubrey de Grey. He works for the Sense Foundation. And he said that the person that's going to live to be 1,000 is alive right now, because they're going to go in and get gene editing and be able to unlock this genetic potential that's inside of us. So if he's saying these weird things, because he's not biblical anything, he drinks, he's just out in Europe drinking beer, riding a boat every day. That's like his hobby. He spends his time doing that, and then in the laboratory. Yet he's saying that genetically, this is our potential. He's never read scripture that I'm aware of. He's secular. He's literally saying what we say is the potential of human beings. Is that pretty peculiar? Or
I mean, maybe if you modify the genome so much that you could live to 1,000, but I think something's going to come along before you ever reach that age and kill you.
Yeah, I did read a book one time that said if humans did not die, how old would the average lifespan be? And until you're hit by a car or something ridiculous. And you're right, it wasn't very high. It was like if you were immortal, it was 2014 years.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there weren't cars to hit you back in the biblical times, but you might get run over by a donkey or something.
How embarrassing!
Yeah,
it would be a bad way to go.
But yeah, something is going to come along. You're going to have an accident. I mean, back then you fall and break your leg, you're pretty screwed.
Yeah, that would be bad. Yeah, you get a little infection and you could be in trouble. That's for sure.
So that's one of the reasons I have a problem with people living to 900. I just think something's going to come along and happen, not even genetically, but physically, or it's going to come and kill you.
Oh, definitely. But remember, we're only looking at 10 generations, and that's only to the lineage of Noah. That's what it's going to. The Bible doesn't follow other lineages. It's literally just following, because it wants to take you from Adam to Jesus. So though there a lot of other people lived, it doesn't talk about them. It doesn't care. It's like, we need to follow this line to him. So that's why you see the 900 and 700 and then 600 and then the plateau. I mean, only 10 people needed to live that long. So if there's a paradise world that God placed us in, and it's in a garden that's kind of surrounded and people are migrating and only moving east, and the world being conducive for us and made for us, looks pretty good for us to be able to make that potential. Now, okay, so now what would be able to kill us? Clearly in the fossil record, we have things that can kill us. We have dinosaurs, but that depends now on where was Eden. Was Eden around a place where these types of dinosaurs lived? Obviously, Adam would have known what dinosaurs are because God brought all the animals to him to name. So if he brought these to him, and now all of a sudden the plants are cursed with thorns, and now animals are cursed with being, some of them, 2% or whatever, carnivores, we would know to stay away from those, just like we don't want to live around the most dangerous animals today.
Yeah, that's an interesting argument. The saying that all the animals lived at the same time just after the fall, and saying, hey, now you can eat meat, or just after the ark, whenever it happened. Suddenly you have tyrannosaurs and Dunkleosteus in the ocean, and mosasaurs in the ocean, and Utah raptors and Dakota raptors coming after you. I think that's a tall order to avoid. after the fall. A lot of stuff that can kill you in the fossil record.
We definitely think that almost all those things in the ocean died. 90% of everything in the ocean definitely died. I know there's sightings of plesiosaur with Loch Ness, so they think there's some survivors of these things, but we think that the flood wiped out pretty much 90% of all the aquatic life. So definitely no megalodons made it.
I'm talking about like after the fall, and suddenly everything is not.
Oh, the fall. Sorry, I thought you meant the flood, like after Noah.
No.
Sorry.
I mean, you have a 1,500-year period of monsters running around.
Yes.
In the ocean and on land, until they die out after the flood.
Right, and we have humans in one area of the world where God created them, and they only migrated, seems like, to the east of it, because when you read the description of where people went, they just moved east. So wherever God placed them must have been in a safe zone away from these animals. Now remember, only 10 generations had to live and survive during this time. If people like, for example, Neanderthal could survive in the Arctic surrounded by saber-tooth, dire wolf, woolly mammoth, what is that? The woolly rhino, basically just horrendous animals that want to kill them all the time. Yet it wasn't those animals that killed them. The woolly mammoth went extinct from inbreeding. They died. There went their food source. So now they only were surrounded by horrendous beasts, and that would pretty much finish them off. And it was inbreeding that ended up killing them, not even the animals.
Well, I think it was climate change that killed the mammoths.
Oh, really? Must be. I heard Wrangler Island or something was the last place woolly mammoths were alive.
Yeah,
and it was inbreeding that took them out. But
there's other last population was inbreeding. But I think in general you could say that 99% of the population went extinct from climate change. But maybe that last holdout island population a couple thousand years ago died from inbreeding.
Got it. I could see that. But, oh yeah, back to where we were. How much time do we got, by the way?
You've got exactly 5.5 minutes, gentlemen. If we want to, maybe let me pause the clock real quick. Why don't we pick a point in the opening statements and the rebuttals that maybe we haven't quite yet exhausted in terms of discussion, and kind of go with that. Matt, I guess since you're the affirmative tonight, let's have you pick what you think is another strong line of evidence that would help demonstrate that man indeed did live to 900 in the past. And let's see kind of Jackson engage that a bit for the final 5.5 minutes of the discussion. So go ahead, gentlemen.
Okay. Wow. Strong one. The strong one would definitely be the genetic database that inputs over 6,000 to 20,000 new diseases every 3 months into their system. They input it on time. It's published. You can go there at any time, and you can just read through it and see that the mutations are just leading to diseases that they have to document. These aren't just like passive mutations. Right, a lot of the opponents to genetic entropy say, yeah, so what that there's mutations accumulating? These are all neutral mutations. They don't mean anything to the population. Well, if that's true, then we wouldn't be seeing the genetic database of disease filling up with mutations that cause disease. Clearly, there's a disparity between what they're telling us and then what we actually see. That's a tough question, I know, to say, like, how do you explain that the disease pouring in through genetics when your model says that this isn't happening, but genetic entropy is telling us that that's exactly what we would expect to see, and it's on the rise, and it'll continue to rise without any stopping at all. The only way we could stop it is genetic editing, from what I'm aware of. What would you say how would that happen? How would selection help? How would if that's not true, why?
Well, I would say most mutations are neutral, and then the next biggest is the detrimental mutations, and then after that you have some beneficial mutations. But Yeah, the neutral ones, I don't get why they're a problem. They're, I mean, kind of neutral by definition most of the time anyway. Some say they have a vanishingly small effect. But what was the second part? I kind of lost my train of thought.
It's okay. That's a hard question. I should have asked another one.
But I think I remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
You know, anything made of genetic material, RNA or DNA, I think is a good analog for genetic entropy, like my crappy calculation about HIV. I think that's my strongest point here in the debate today. Just 4.7 million years of human existence could be accounted for, and nothing would happen if taking mutation rates into account.
Did you know that John Sanford wrote something called Mendel's Accountant? And it's a program that's basically peer reviewed, and it's based on mutation load. And you can run pretty much any desired thing that you want. You can test evolution yourself. You can input as many beneficial mutations as you want in a starting population, and no matter what, it ends up dying after it's not even close to 1 million years. So what happens is the critics go, well, it doesn't matter. It's a young Earth creation program. But did you know that the NIH, the National Institute of Health, uses the young Earth creationist model that he created, not an evolutionary model, to deal with the disease and sickness? And there's no arguments that have been done against it except for a couple websites and blogs. Nobody publishes against it. Nobody does anything like of value to bring it down. And go ahead.
I don't doubt John Sanford has invented some stuff that's been very useful. He invented the gene gun, after all, which is a big deal. But I think he's looking for the conclusion he wants, and I think that's the major problem there.
Well, did you know he was convinced of being a Christian because of what he discovered? He became a young Earth creationist because of his discoveries of genetic entropy. That's what's unique about John Sanford. He wasn't born into a Christian, just like Donny and I weren't either. Argument that critics use is they said that he stole Kimura's idea, and Kimura said that beneficial mutations will outweigh the harmful ones. But Kimura only speculated that was true. He never saw it. John Sanford came along and wanted to test what Kimura said and see what the outcome was. And he did, and said, look at that. These results don't line up. And just like you said, sure, there's some beneficial mutations, but there's not nearly enough to wipe out the vast majority of harmful mutations that's killing us, like you said, before we ever even reach our genetic potential. So lifespan's going to keep decreasing, not biological longevity, not our potential, not 120, but our potential to reach 120 is dwindling more and more and more because of disease increasing throughout the time. The medical intervention is the only thing that's really saving us now. So
let me use this point. I used in my opening statement. Why are the ages so even for when they died? It doesn't ring true to me. Like Shem died at 600, Noah died at 950 exactly. You would think it'd be 953, 605 something. If these were real ages,
Right. No, everything in Scripture seems to be analogous to something else. Did you know if you were to take Adam's name all the way to Noah and read each name for what it translates to, like let's say my name Matthew is gift of God, and you read them off for what they translate to, it reads into a story. So you would think, wow, that's reading into a story. Obviously, those people aren't true because it's reading into a story. But you can do the same thing after the flood and continue to read the story. So are all of them fake people? Then none of them real because there's a story that can be laid out? No, for some reason, Scripture is so unique and so prophetic that the ages and the names all mean something as well. So it's almost like God had some type of a plan when all of this was playing out, just like there's a plan for us right now. What's going on? What are we headed to, and what's going on? So if we look at it just from, You can definitely look at those numbers and go, what is it trying to tell us? Because it could be trying to tell us something as well. It doesn't invalidate that the numbers could be true, though. And that's what we wanted to test. And that's what makes a lot of these things unique. Patriarchal drive testing those ages. We can't just go, oh, well, it's true. Well, why? Oh, I have faith. That's good enough for me. Well, you get that, God did it isn't an answer. You have to have answers for these things. So we wanted to test and see if somebody did live over 500. So the best way of doing that, just through genetics. So we have patriarchal drive. We have modern day geneticists like Aubrey de Grey saying that our genetic potential's there. We have the gene knockout tests that are showing us that lifespan decreases when you remove these longevity genes or hinder them in any way. We just have, mutation accumulation, occurring, these fast mutation rates. We just see it almost everywhere we look, that the evidence points to us having a better genome in the past with less mutations, less mutation accumulation, less disease, and which would all point to a longer life.
Now, you mentioned some maybe extra biblical sources for these long ages. The only ones I could find are things like the Sumerian kings list, which were ridiculous, like 40,000 year reigns of kings, or even more ridiculous in Jainism, like you have quintillion-year-old gods, But is there some extra biblical source for, say, Noah living to 900 and something?
Yeah, the Chinese have Noah. His name is Yu, I think. There's Noah in a lot of different stories. But the reason that the Sumerians have a very bizarre thing where people are reigning 12,000 years is because they used a different mathematical system. And we know this because they actually looked at the patriarchs, and those are the names. They're just in a different language. And these are after the flood. So that's unique as well, by the way. Like there's a person named U-R, and he's on the Sumerian kings list, and it says he reigned for 12,000 years. But they had a sexagesimal math system where it's a base 60. So everything was exponentially much more than it should be. And when you reduce those numbers, you see that they only reigned for like 6 years or 8 years or 12 years. They just had a completely different math system. But it's literally the same people in scripture on that Sumerian kings list, or at least a couple of them are. So they just had a different math system. So that explains why they got such a bizarre, that was not even their lifespan that you were reading. That's their reigning time of how long they reigned as a king. So that makes it even more ridiculous. Like, well, if they reigned for 12,000 years, how long did they live? 14,000? It was just ridiculous.
Well, that's another point about the pre-flood patriarchs. I mean, couldn't their ages be symbolic to their importance to Scripture?
True, and that is also why we test it. But then again, we thought maybe in the beginning they were lunar months. Maybe these people were maybe they counted every year as a lunar month. But you really get into a problem with that when you get to like Seth, because he had his kid when he was 12 years old if you do that. Now, I don't know what kind of Mac daddy he was, but that doesn't seem very reasonable. There's also another one
weird back then.
Really young when they had their first kid, if you want to think that they're lunar years. So like you said, maybe symbolic. That's what Catholics believe. They see those numbers and they go, it's just allegorical. They're not true. That's why we have to go to the numbers. And that's why we have to go to the tests. And we go, let's test and what would we see if Noah was 500 when he had the kids? And that's what's so cool about patriarchal drive is we ran the numbers and they match what we see today. So like you said, we don't have to trust the numbers. We don't have to trust what Scripture says at all. We can test it. And that's what we want to do. That's why we like the science the most on this channel. We want to put what Scripture says to the test and see, is it actually true? Or were they actually just telling us a allegorical story that was meant to be understood in a different time to a different people? That's all.
Yeah, my whole position is you can believe in Jesus and all of that and still believe that parts of the Bible is allegorical, that you don't need to that's how I used to believe it.
Oh yeah, that's how a lot of believers today do it as well. There's definitely no doubt about that. Yeah, that's not salvational to think that there was a canopy or dinosaurs lived with man. That doesn't matter at all. Yeah. We just like to show, like, if this was true, now we have good evidence. Now imagine the evidence being so compelling that it converts somebody. That's much better, because the average critic nowadays, they don't believe that Scripture is true because evolution is true. So if you say, well, young earth creation is true because of this evidence, now they'll be like, oh, that's more interesting. You're not going to catch them with like, oh, that's just allegorical stories. It doesn't really matter. It's just much harder today. So you want to meet somebody where they're at, what they like, what they enjoy. I can't convince somebody to fight me if they've never been in a fight before. But if they've trained 10 years of their life, yeah, they'll get right on the mat with me quick.
Right, let me jump in there, Jackson. I understand you might want to respond to some of that. I've allowed it to go a few minutes over the allotted discussion time, and time has flown by. It's been a great discussion. As I predicted, very easy to moderate. Both of you guys are cordial, respectful, and sophisticated in your dialogue. I think we've discussed the major points brought up in the openings and the rebuttal. So why don't we, there we go. Why don't we hand it to you, Jackson? So Matt being the affirmative, what we're going to do, Jackson, is give you your 5-minute concluding statement. You can wrap up your thoughts, wrap up your points. Then we'll do the same thing for Matt, and then we'll go into some audience Q&A. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So Jackson, over to you for 5 minutes.
All right.
Statement.
I kind of lost my train of thought, so I don't remember what I was going to say, but I will just say, good debate. It was more of a discussion than a debate. It went really well, I think. Matt's a nice guy, very knowledgeable, obviously, and just a cordial discussion. So, I'd like to debate Matt again someday. I think this was fun. So that's really all I have to add. I'm not going to take 5 minutes.
I barely had enough time to take a sip of my coffee there, Jackson. Yeah. I'm just kidding. All good. One thing wrong there, though, Jackson. Matt is not a nice guy. So he's got you fooled on that one. So I can tell you confidently, I'm just kidding. Matt's probably the nicest guy you'll ever meet. He's got rewards in heaven. I'll tell you that much. So I appreciate that concluding statement there, Jackson Roe. I appreciate you giving us your time for this debate. And just to give you a couple shout outs, for those who enjoy debates with Jackson Roe, he comes in with good points and good questions for us to discuss. He will be back debating myself on the 7th. We'll be debating specifically the question of ancestry. He will also be debating Professor David McQueen again on the Cambrian explosion. And we are also working at finalizing a day and time for Matt Powell. So Jackson Roe versus Matt Powell, that'll be certainly a ton of fun. So that being said, Matt, break time's over. We're going to hand it over to you. You got 5 minutes, brother, for your concluding statement.
Okay. First thing I'll say then is that we didn't invent genetic entropy. We discovered it, just like we discovered gravity, right? So we thought that since evolution must be true, genetic entropy cannot be true. Yet we found evidence that, we could ever want more evidence than what we found, I think, to show that genetic entropy is something that's real. If we could look for something to disprove it, you're only going to find minute things that aren't even associated with the theory. You look up what genetic entropy actually talks about and what it is, and you're only going to find examples that go against it in things that the theory doesn't even predict. So that's pretty amazing. That's pretty good predictive power of the theory as well. So I gave examples from outside of genetic entropy model so that I could, my opponent could attack it. He didn't really know much about genetic entropy in general, mostly because he didn't read John Sanford's work. So that's completely fine. So we just mostly talked about mutation accumulation and the fast mutation rates. And it's astounding that when you look at these mutation rates, how they go back in time, not very far. They literally go back to a single person in just just thousands of years ago, not hundreds of thousands, not millions, nowhere near what evolution needs to be true. That's why they invented their own phylogenetic chart rather than, the pedigree study observable rates. And that's fine. You can believe whatever you want, but the evidence keeps fitting our model. We can't change our model. It's already written down in scripture. So if we found the wrong evidence, we'd just be like, wow, big trouble. I guess this wasn't true. I guess it was an allegorical myth. But the evidence keeps pointing, in my mind, to exactly what scripture is talking about. So another thing that I really think is a major problem with scientists today not agreeing with genetic entropy is that there's a huge hindrance in medicine because they view mutations as it's okay. It's happened for millions of years. But in our model, it's a horrible problem that needs to be fixed immediately. So the two different perceptions are vastly different. And I think that ours is more helpful in medicine and theirs is not so helpful. I'm just saying that I want the problem to be fixed. I want people to live longer. I want disease to be eradicated. But with the mindset of genetic entropy not being true, it's a hindrance to science. It's a hindrance to medicine. So if people lived as long as they did in scripture, which I think I've given plenty of evidence that they have for my case, but I'll let the audience decide and let them decide if Jackson refuted these, then that's fine. Good. I hope I gave ample evidence that man could have lived this vastly longer in the past and that one day maybe we can again. But, you know, are we going to be like genetically modified foods? I don't know. I mean, we're going to be genetically altered babies where you want a blonde hair, blue eyed baby. No problem. We can design that in too. I might get a little wacky. I don't know. There'll be some ethical issues with all that, but I'm more interested in the longevity aspect. And we keep seeing the same theme when you look at these experts, and they keep saying you remove the mutations, you get healthier and you live longer. And that's exactly what we would expect to see in our model, and exactly what we do see when we see generation after generation after generation, more disease, more problems, more health issues, more compiling of mutations, more harmful mutations. So I don't really know what more evidence I could give. My initial video was like 20 something minutes. So I did have a much more evidence, but I just stuck with this because that would be a little more fun to throw in some genealogies and give them some arguments outside of genetics, right? Not everybody wants to talk about just genetics the entire time. So I think the evidence is everywhere. You can look around and just see it in different things, and that helps confirm the longevity. It doesn't refute it. If we're following genealogies and the genealogies say these are real people, but yet, you know, they're saying that it's not. Well, I don't know. You know, these aren't just biblical lineages. We're seeing them in lineages outside of the Bible. And then we see text outside of that also talks about these people. And then we hear of legends of a flood that goes back to Noah in different parts of the world. Well, clearly these must be real people that's going on because we keep seeing this. So if they're real and then they are real people, well, are the numbers that we're reading real? And that's really all it comes down to. And the evidence to me points as though it is correct, and we'll prove it. And the good thing about this is, you know, if we were having this debate in about 200 years from now, we would have people living over 120 easy. And then this debate would be very easy. But right now we've just learned about this evidence. And now we're trying to get the public involved and excited about the potential that we could live longer. And they are like, how though? This doesn't make any sense. It's just, you know, they're fighting against it rather than going with it. And I just find that very peculiar. That's all.
All right. Perfect timing. That is 5 minutes on the dot. So I appreciate that concluding statement there, Matt. I appreciate your concluding statement, Jackson. That's another one in the books. That's a fantastic debate on an important, interesting topic. We've had a great audience, over 100 people nearly the entire time. And I believe this was we've now hosted 146 debates. So, and the fun continues tomorrow as we have another debate, and it'll be on specifically soteriology, is perseverance of the saints biblical. So when it comes to debates on this channel, we like to provide you guys with a diversity of topics between science, creation, evolution, philosophy, soteriology, theology, the nature of God, so on and so forth. So the fun continues tomorrow. J.D. Martin and A.K. Richardson. And then on the 3rd, we've got Jonathan here, whose channel, I believe it's called Word of Life or Word of Truth. It's in the description box of that event. So check it out to see his videos. He'll be taking on Dr. Dino. Is there reasonable evidence for evolution? And that'll be on the 3rd. So keep yourselves updated. check out the upcoming live stream section. I just confirmed a few more shows over the last couple days, so I am just working at setting those events for everybody. If you're not yet subscribed, but you love debates, interviews, discussions, and more, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And please share around this content, as the truth is so important and critical thinking is important as well. That's why we love to host these debates, get people like Matt and Jackson, a couple of superstars here to discuss these topics that, they obviously disagree on, but to show the world that we can come together and have these intellectual discussions, even though we may disagree. So the other thing I want to plug is logical, plausible, probable. I see it, brother. I see it. So SFT has forgotten to plug the after show, and I'm remembering right now. Logical, plausible, probable. Again, congratulations on the 2,000 subscribers. And as we all know, John Maddox has some pretty epic, memorable after shows. Last week, we had an epic after show for Kent's debate with, I think, Matthew Steele. And tonight, the fun continues. So again, a logical, plausible, probable after show is going to happen. Kicks off right after this debate ends. And what we're going to do is jump right into the audience Q&A, wrap it up around the 2-hour mark, maybe 2 hour and 15-minute mark. And that way, head on over to John's channel for another epic after show. So gentlemen, Matt, Jackson, break time is over. I thought I'd give you guys a little time to rest, gather your thoughts, relax. Let's get right into it. So you both already know whoever the question is for gets the last word. That way we can move along smoothly. But we also do that just to have some engagement on each question from the both of you. So any last minute questions in the chat, please tag me. And if they're relevant to the topic, then I can put them up on screen for us to engage as well. So here we go. First question that came in a long time ago from Daniel Spencer. He says, question for Jackson. And what I'll do here, Jackson, is get these questions into the comment section. And Kenny Rhodes says, I really don't like Raw Matt. He's too good looking. So Matt, what do you say to that, brother? He's coming at you.
This is just a mask. It's not real. That's all.
What's really underneath there? A 500-year-old man? Matt, you've lived since the Tower of Babel, so it'd be too obvious. You got to wear the youthful-looking mask. So laughter is the best medicine, and I appreciate that, Kenny. So I wanted to get that in there. So here we go. First question, Jackson. Daniel Spencer has a question for you. So get ready, my good man. So he says, how is it that you believe that man would turn to, quote, goo, if Adam and Eve is real when your model says we come from goo?
Well, not necessarily goo. We come from it's prebiotic chemistry, but again, I don't. It's abiogenesis is a tough topic. So I say a God could have created that first cell or set of cells, population of cells. So. So my model is kind of fluid on whatever the evidence for that shows, and it's not really clear to me right now, the beginning of life.
All right, Jackson, I appreciate that answer. Matt, anything you wanted to add to that, brother?
Oh, I thought it was just for him. No, not for me.
Okay.
No
All right,
question.
let's move.
Can I respond to that? Just kidding.
Jackson, you get the last word. So I know Matt was coming at you there, so feel free to. No, I'm just kidding. That's good. So here we go. George Bond, $20 super chat. I appreciate the support, George. If anybody doesn't know, George is our award-winning co-host, so I appreciate it. Actually, this will be a good time to announce we are working at some big debates, specifically a big old earth creation versus young earth creation debate between, two well-known ministries in the old earth creation world and the young earth creation world. that'll be it for details for now, but we are working on it. George and I are working on it as well. So we should have more details in the next few days, and we'll let you guys know. So next question, though, that comes in is from, let's see, I'm just looking in the side chat. Okay, here we go. One God is now here. This one's for you again, Jackson. I'll put it up on screen. One God is now here. $25 super chat. I appreciate the support. He says, question for Jackson. Has any human being ever seen a living dinosaur?
I feel like this is bait to get me to say that birds are dinosaurs. And birds are dinosaurs, and they're everywhere. Quoting a movie that I forget the name of. Anyway, that's my answer. Yeah. So technically, yes.
All right. I appreciate it. Matt, anything you wanted to add to that, my good man?
I would definitely say yes, just because of the, I would say the evidence from the soft tissues that we found. There's 18 different biological elements that they found that are all biological in dinosaur tissue now. They all have different decay rates, yet all of them are there. None of them have racemized. We've got dinosaur tracks that, with human. I know those get argued, but I would just say, yeah, I think there's good evidence for it.
Okay. And Jackson, final word?
I don't really have anything to add.
All right. Next question comes in from God and Gun Klinger. So he says, question for Mattman. Do you believe in a canopy protecting Earth from deep space radiation and a high atmospheric oxygen content lengthening life?
Well, something made the old world higher in oxygen. The answer to that in our model was a canopy. I believed in the canopy, like you can see from my flood series. I thought that a meteor must have broke the canopy, right? But now I don't really argue too much for it, simply because I don't have evidence for it. So kind of hard to defend something that you don't have evidence for. So I just say, it doesn't really matter. But something in the past had changed the atmosphere of the planet dramatically. Everywhere we look on Earth, there was tropical plants everywhere. And now they're in the poles. You go into Antarctic, South Pole. Doesn't really matter. You're going to find tropical plants. We're in the fossil record everywhere. Something created that. So how the old world was, maybe it was just Pangea being around the equator, or maybe it helped that there was a firmament. We don't really know. The scripture is very vague on what a firmament even is. It could just be the atmosphere. So.
All right. I appreciate that response, Matt. I appreciate the question, God and Gun Klinger. Jackson, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. I know Matt doesn't really rely on the canopy, but there are a lot of reasons not to believe in the canopy. I mean, the way Ken Hovind describes it being held up by the Meissner effect, that especially makes no sense, as ice is only very, very slightly diamagnetic, and the Meissner effect applies to superconducting magnets. And the Earth's core is far too hot to be a superconductor anyway. Even if it was, ice isn't diamagnetic enough to float in that manner. So that's in that model of the canopy, that's impossible.
All right. I appreciate that. Jackson, question was for you, Matt. You can have the last word.
I would imagine that Kent would probably say it was because the Earth had a lot more magnetism in the past. It may have been able to support the ice canopy, considering it's about 400 degrees negative, minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit in space where the ice would have been. Again, I got to read the numbers on that. I don't really look so much into the canopy model. I couldn't give you the numbers. Sorry. As a matter of fact, we got to have a guy on to talk about that, because there's a Dr. Carl Bogg who specializes in that in Texas, and he likes that. And we got to remember to get him on sometime, because that would be a fun. You can get all those questions answered, because he loves that theory.
All right. I appreciate the engagement on that question, Jackson and Matt. So next one comes in from Ashley Myers. Question is for you, Jackson. So she asks, how do you explain wisdom teeth from Neanderthal man?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know what point she's making. Other than Neanderthals had wisdom teeth, I don't know. You got to be more specific, I think. So, Matt, you want to add anything to that?
Neanderthal had a very good structure of their mouth. Our structure is getting smaller, and our teeth don't fit much anymore. So the body is like not even trying to make wisdom teeth in some people anymore because they just don't fit. So my best guess to that question, like explain wisdom teeth in Neanderthal, maybe would be a knock on how come Neanderthal have good structure and wisdom teeth, and then today we don't have good structure and we're losing wisdom teeth. So it shows genetic entropy. That would be my best guess as to what they were saying.
Yeah, if that's what they mean, I would say probably a different skull structure would accommodate wisdom teeth in Neanderthals. If that's what they're saying, I don't know.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, gentlemen. Feel free, Ashley, if you wanted to put in like a follow-up question or anything like that. That's completely fine as well. So here we go. Question comes in from the award-winning co-host himself, George Bond, and he is coming at you, Jackson. So he says, Standing for Truth, question for Jackson. Why believe in a geologic column when erosion rates wash away the long ages every 12 million years?
Well, for one reason, there is a geologic column that you can find in multiple places in the world. So obviously it wasn't washed away. But deposition and erosion rates are different in different places. And there's something on Talk Origins about that from like the 90s. That question's been addressed. I don't remember the exact answer to it, but it's something along those lines. So that's pretty much my answer.
All right. I appreciate that, Jackson. Matt, anything you wanted to add?
I mean, erosion rates are very, very quick. I know that they're getting at like how come all the rivers and everything that flow into the ocean are young based on the erosions that we're seeing and the erosion rates of Yosemite, the Niagara Falls and different things like that. So I would just say that the geologic column, we see lots of strange anomalies, and the reason why is because I think that obviously global catastrophism would cause massive anomalies all over the place. So, I mean, we're going to find massive erosion in some places and then not much in others. So it's kind of hard to quantify and say we should be finding erosion rates rapid everywhere, but it's kind of hard to rapidly erode limestone, for example. So we shouldn't use just one piece of evidence. We got to use a lot. And I like the discrepancies in the fossil record more than I like erosion rates. But
all right, I appreciate that, Matt. Jackson, question was for you. You get the last word.
Kind of unconventional. Can I ask Matt what kind of inconsistencies in the fossil record he means?
They expected Darwinian gradualism only. Then they found punctuated equilibrium, which is massive jumps. Then they found rapid evolution, where species forming out of nowhere, like sultanization or something. And then they found like complete stasis. Literally, they found absolutely everything in every direction. So rather than only finding the evidence of the only thing we should see, they found evidence for absolutely everything. So if it's so plastic that you can find everything and just give a reason for it, then it's not really a predictable theory at all.
Well, I mean, you're never going to find a mammoth in the Triassic. I mean, it's not. That's really just all I have to say. I mean, it is ordered to a large extent.
All right. Well, let's move right on to the next question, guys. I appreciate it. And I did have it here in the chat. And here we go. So a question comes in from Duke Scanlon at SFT. Question for Matt. Do you think there is a biblical reason that no one is recorded as being 1,000?
Yeah, it seems no one made it. Matter of fact, did you know that Noah lived longer than Adam did? So that's pretty peculiar. I would just say that it seems like 1,000 was the potential, like the geneticists today are saying. But just like Roe was saying, we don't make that potential all the time. We're cut short. We never maximize it. Now, Adam was obviously kind of stressed out in life, right? His first kid killed his other one. So we would imagine that having a more stressful life probably took something out of him. Maybe Eve killed him. I don't know. We don't know. But 1,000 being the maximum peak, just like today, almost nobody makes their maximum potential. So just like back then, probably nobody else did either.
All right. I appreciate that, Matt. Go ahead, Jackson.
That's really more of a theological question, so I don't really have much to add to it.
All right. Let's move on here. We got a question from, let me see, get it back on screen. Question from conservative Christian. So she says, question for Jackson. How could a sixth dynasty king reign 94 years if max life for U.S. people, us people, is 87 years today, almost 4,000 years ago?
Well, 94 is old. He reigned for 94 years, or he was 94 when he died?
He reigned that long.
He reigned that long?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to explain that. So that's really all I have to say. I doubt that number is all I have to say.
Anything you wanted to add, Matt, before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, that was a census that was taken later. So he's a real human being, and he reigned 94 years. And guess what? He was actually murdered. I know that king. He was actually killed and replaced, and then the kingdom fell apart after he died. So who knows how long? Not only was he alive before he reigned, but who knows how long he could have lived after. I mean, reigning for 94 years. Pretty incredible, considering we're always told the people in the past barely could live for any amount of time because, there was too much, lifespan and life potential wasn't very good. But that we have, matter of fact, Hippocrates. We have the Hippocrates Health Institute today. He lived thousands of years ago, and he lived to 120. Incredible. So.
All right. Thank you, Matt and Jackson. So next question comes in from Richard Madsen. He doesn't really specify anybody, but we can get both your input on this if you want. We'll start with you, Matt. I think it's more so for you. He says, have you looked into negligible senescence, where even a mammal whale effectively does not die of old age?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that don't seem to die from old age. It's a very peculiar paradox. Why do humans live so much longer after we reproduce? It doesn't make much sense evolutionarily. So they actually came up with, maybe there's a grandparenting theory where maybe we live extra generations so we can help grandfather our children's children and their children, because we can have like great grandparents still alive. Makes no sense evolutionarily. That's why it's a paradox. And there's animals like whales and rockfish and lobsters that just don't biologically age. They can live for hundreds of years. There's things that don't even die, they think, like a hydra. They have no idea how to really explain these things because they're outside of that negligible senescence, which is the buildup of these cells that the body can't get rid of. So yeah, they're very strange paradoxes where things that should be dying really aren't, because their system isn't messed up so genetically as where the human system, we messed ourselves up a lot from that bottleneck that we were in. But some animals, the bottleneck wasn't as severe for them. Obviously, rockfish and lobster aren't going on the ark. So if a lot of them survived the flood, the bottleneck wouldn't have been as severe. They would have more of that genetic potential they would have had before the flood. Therefore, they would be living much longer like they would have before the flood.
All right. Thank you for the answer, Matt. Very thorough. And Jackson, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's kind of what I was talking about with the tortoises, negligible senescence. They just don't really age the same way that other animals do. And the ark explanation might work for like ocean-dwelling animals that had a larger population, but it wouldn't really work for tortoises that still can make it to a couple hundred years old. And interestingly, they did find a bowhead whale that had a harpoon in it from the 1800s. So it was at least 200-something years old. And that's all I have to add.
All right, Matt, final word?
Yeah. You said tortoises didn't make it on the ark, but the difference between a tortoise and a turtle is turtles live on land. Tortoises live in the ocean. Aquatic life wouldn't have gone. They would no reason to bring aquatic life on the ark.
All right.
Tortoises live in the ocean?
Yeah.
I think you have it backwards. Turtles live in the ocean.
Oh, turtles do.
Yeah.
Reverse it then.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's move right to this one. Comes in from Redefine Living. I appreciate the question. Redefine Living. So he says, question for Jackson. Can you name a single gene associated with longevity?
Seems like a pop quiz to try to make me look stupid. But the honest answer is no. I can name telomeres that shrink over time, but I can't name a specific gene. I didn't look into it quite thoroughly enough, I guess.
Thank you for the response, Jackson. I appreciate it. Matt, anything you wanted to add?
The GATA6 gene, the sirtuins, there's 1 through 7. Number 3 is the most popular. The FOXO set of genes. Yeah, I love the subject though, so it's complete. Yeah, I love longevity, so definitely know the genes. There's a lot of them.
Well, we know you do because there's a 500-year-old man hiding behind that mask of yours. So you've clearly unlocked the secrets to longevity, brother. So Jackson, question was for you. Final word.
Yeah, I just need to do more research in longevity genes. It's not something that really ever piqued my interest until this particular moment. So
no worries.
Yeah.
No worries. Good job to the both of you. So question comes in from Josephina Sharp. Question for you, Jackson. So she says, Jackson, can you not believe in 900-year life at the same time believe life came from non-life, a much larger leap of faith? What are your thoughts on that, Jackson?
Well, again, it's kind of similar to the other question. I don't necessarily believe that life formed on its own. I think it probably did, but I think God could have made it, especially created at some low level in the fossil record like we see, and it evolved into what we are now. So I don't think it's necessary that there is no God. There definitely could be. That's really all I have to say.
All right, I appreciate that. And here we go. Last question. This one comes in from Sock'em9710. He says, question for Jackson. What evidence would change your mind?
It's a good question. I couldn't really pin it for the age thing. I have to research a little more to get back to an answer for that one. But again, you could disprove evolution pretty easy in my mind. If you found out that, say, a mouse was far more closely related to us genetically than a chimp appears to be, or something like that, or you found, like I said, shark teeth in the Cambrian period, which would be expected, but just isn't found. So that would be my answer for that.
Matt, anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, if we reversed it, I did believe in evolution, so my mind was changed. My mind was convinced on creation over evolution. So don't really know. I mean, what would convert it back? I don't know. Aliens landing? I'll give me. That'd be a weird one.
If War of the Worlds came to life.
Yeah.
All right, Jackson, final word, my good man.
I don't think I have anything to add.
All right. And also to everybody who sent in a super sticker, super chats, and just showing some love and support. I appreciate it. As I always say, you guys are the life and blood of this channel. And this is a listener-supported ministry, so we greatly appreciate all the support. It helps us to continue putting out full-time content. So logical, plausible, probable. After show is going to happen. Kicks off right after this debate ends. Don't miss it. He's got the link there, guys. So click that link, because I'm sure it'll be another after show to remember. And if you're not yet subscribed to LPP's channel, he just hit 2,000 subscribers. So make sure to subscribe, because he's putting out some fantastic content. So I think we're going to call it there, guys. I appreciate all the questions, the feedback, the comments. We just hit the 2-hour mark, and great endurance. Mattman, Jackson Roe. That was a great debate on an important and very interesting topic. Lots of great feedback from the chat as well. So what we usually do, guys, though, some final words, final thoughts before we shut it down for the night. Why don't we start with you, Jackson? Jackson, again, thank you so much for giving us your time for tonight's debate. Some final words, final thoughts.
All right. I just want to say that I might believe in genetic entropy now because Matt is turning purple. So clearly something's happening. But seriously, no, it was a good debate, cordial discussion, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'll be in the after show. I hope Matt will be also. And you too, Donny.
If Matt's not there, I'll take his place. I'll be joining. I've got a couple things to do first, including get some food in me, and then I'll for sure be joining, and we'll have a good discussion. But I don't want to give away too much, Jackson, as I know you and I have a debate in about 7 days, so we don't want to give away all our little secrets and tricks just yet, right? So I'm just kidding. That's going to be a ton of fun. Let's hand it over to Mattman. Mattman, again, brother, thank you for giving us your time for this debate. I appreciate it. This debate was fantastic. Final words, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I just I'm glad it was a fun debate. It was good. I thought maybe I would be debating somebody else. So it was good because they fell through and didn't want to do it. So good. I won't be joining the after show. I have to go. I'm going to be training, so I'm going to miss that, unfortunately. But it's all right. You know, this is a long time. It's a long time to debate, so I'm okay missing that. But it's all right. It'll be fun. John's channel is awesome, and it usually turns into crazy chats. So that's what makes John's channel fun.
You never know where it's going to go. You never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, his open mics are crazier than my debates.
Right, it's when the real dumpster fire begins. You know, people don't want to admit it, but they want a dumpster fire now and again. So this was a very cordial, sophisticated debate, guys. We had over 100 people here enjoying your discussion. Guys, please pass this around, share around this content, and also Standing For Truth Ministries, as you know, and Matt kind of iterated it there. We put out a debate challenge. There's a number of us, like Professor David McQueen. He's our team geologist. We got Mattman, living proof of genetic entropy, as Jackson Roe before. Turning purple. Yeah, and we've got a number of us that are ready and willing to have some debates on all types of topics. Jackson, I always appreciate you being willing to engage these important topics. So again, LPP after show is going to happen. So we'll see you there. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow night. I believe same time, start time, 9 o'clock is Perseverance of the Saints Biblical. Live debate on Standing For Truth, JD Martin and AK Richardson. And then we've got Ken Hovind on the 3rd. There's a few people in the chat asking, you know, where is Kent? Please subscribe to his secondary channel. So look up Dinosaur Adventureland. He's been streaming from his secondary channel, and he's still doing shows nearly every single night. So check that out, YouTube, Dinosaur Adventureland, and make sure you subscribed, because Dr. Dino will be here on the 3rd. So that being said, I think that's it for reminders and announcements. Again, Matt, Jackson, thank you for giving us your time for this epic debate. We'll see you over at the after show. Standing For Truth is out.